Live video series produced by Psychotherapy Networker magazine. I'm Alicia Muñoz, and I'm here today with Dr. Megan Fleming. We are so excited that you're here with us, either tuning in now or watching this on replay. And Dr. Fleming has 25 years of experience working with individuals and couples, and she's got a long bio. I'll try to make it relatively brief. She's a licensed psychologist, an ASEX certified sex therapist, an imago therapist, a clinical instructor at Weill Cornell Medical College. She's the founder and former director of the Sexual Health and Rehabilitation Program at Beth Israel Medical Center in New York City. So I interviewed Dr. Fleming for an article in the last issue of Psychotherapy Networker magazine, right here. And in this article, she talked to us about women, pleasure, focusing on taking pleasure. And I wrote this from a cisgendered woman's perspective, but a lot of these challenges can apply to anybody who has difficulties or challenges taking pleasure in their body. And there should be a link to this article in the comments. If it's not there, it'll be there soon. If you click that link, it'll get you behind the paywall so you can read the article for free. And if you're not already a subscriber to Psychotherapy Networker magazine, now is a great time to subscribe. You can visit the link that's on the screen, popping up on the screen now, hopefully, and there will be a special discount for you there. So if you're joining us, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. Let us know where you're joining us from. So without further ado, welcome, Dr. Fleming. It's great to have you here.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here with you, Alicia.
Yay. So what led you to focus on helping women take more pleasure in their lives? Kind of looking to understand a little bit more about you personally. Why this particular focus for you in your work?
Sure. I mean, I think it really, for me, became sort of real in terms of like after having kids. And, you know, I think all of us kind of want to be the superwoman and have it all and do it all. You know, I grew up with I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan and never let him forget he's your man. So like what I found out, however, I was at the bottom of a to-do list that never got done and that it really didn't feel sustainable. I was like gaining weight and, you know, getting pre-diabetic and just sort of recognizing that, you know, it was almost sort of systemic for me a little bit being raised sort of Irish Catholic, this idea that somehow self-care was selfish or that my having pleasure was taking something from someone else. And I realized, wait a minute, if we're doing this right, I mean, it's why they tell you to put the oxygen mask on the plane first, right? Is that it's only when we really allow ourselves and prioritize self-care. And again, pleasure is sort of taking it up that notch. And I think it really is just the more we resource ourselves, the more we actually have to give. And so it was really when I was confronting, in a sense, my own burnout and my own limits that I discovered this. And then what I also discovered, you know, having done this work so long, is that it's kind of ubiquitous. A lot of women kind of globally struggle. Like pleasure's sort of been vilified and there's so much negative connotation to it. And so again, I sort of say it's a God-given right. And, you know, we all, it's really about knowing and allowing. And really, I really love doing that work with women because, you know, it's really incredibly powerful.
Mm-hmm. You said that you think pleasure has been vilified. And I was also thinking about the way you were contrasting sort of self-care and pleasure, almost like, you know, one of them is more palatable and one of them is sort of harder to speak, harder to own and harder to claim. And I'm just curious about that. You know, why do you think that is? Because we do talk about self-care in mental health as therapists so much, but I think talking about what gives us pleasure, what gives our clients pleasure, seems like it's a little bit of like a rated R kind of theme, and even in therapy today.
I absolutely agree. And I think that, again, there's a lot of cultural influences, religious influences, and that, you know, again, it's often the way we're raised in some ways that, you know, as women, we're the givers, we're the caretakers. And I don't know why pleasure is not supposed to be part of that equation. But I really think that, and again, pleasure sometimes is also sort of associated with more sexual pleasure, which again, equally, we should feel entitled to know, own, and um, be able to experience both on our own and with our partners. And so I think that it's really about taking back the narrative in so many ways, and um, recognizing it sort of as a rebellious act in many ways that we're going to, know and own our pleasure. And that, I sort of say sex isn't a dirty word any more than pleasure is, right? It's really, I think, giving ourselves the permission.
Mm. Well, in the last, you have been working for a quarter of a century. You've been doing this work, which is a long time. And I'm wondering if you've seen a shift in that time of the narrative. Has the narrative shifted for women? And if so, how?
Well, I think in some ways, sort of a yes and a no. I mean, I think that many women today equally struggle with giving themselves permission to explore their turn-ons and pleasure. That being said, I find that they're more open and receptive than I think women of generations past. And I think that there's more experimentation happening now in terms of sexual preferences and just, even jumping out of an airplane, right? There's a lot of things that I think are accessible in a way that they weren't years ago. That being said, some of the things I think are equally challenging is, like sex is everywhere, sort of ubiquitous on the internet, but the ability to have those raw, vulnerable conversations with your partner to really express turn-ons and the exploration of doing it together, I think it's equally hard today as it's always been for most women.
Wow, that's striking. So, in some ways you're saying that sex and pleasure are more visible everywhere on social media, and yet the same challenges that women have faced for decades, maybe even centuries, where being able to name, to speak, to ask for what they want, to feel safe doing that with their partners, that challenge is still here.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought the social media piece, because I actually think in some ways that makes it harder. I mean, I think women have always been hard on themselves and their bodies and the way that they feel like they're quote unquote supposed to look to be desirable and attractive. And I think, again, our culture is like, there's sort of, ageism, right, is still something that we're sort of fighting against, as if pleasure and sex is only for those who are young and beautiful. So I think, again, helping women, reclaim, feel not just like that sense of body positivity, that no matter what shape or size we are, we have the capacity to feel pleasure, and helping women be embodied, because so often they get into their heads and not in a way that focuses on pleasure.
Yeah, so true. So if you're just tuning in, we're talking to psychologist and sex therapist, Dr. Megan Fleming, about the challenges that modern women continue to face taking and prioritizing pleasure in their bodies, in their relationships, and in their lives. And I'm seeing that we have women here from Pakistan and Connecticut, and so people are really tuning into this from all over the world. I mean, this is something that's actually global, and I know culture factors into it. But in the article that you were generous enough to let me interview you for, Dr. Fleming, you talked about how women can actually use pleasure in order to refuel. And, I'm really interested in finding out what that means specifically, because in my work with couples and with women, often, pleasure is experienced as kind of a burden, or like, something that, like you said, something on the to-do list that they have to figure out a way to experience in order to make their partners happy. So I'm wondering, what that means. How do women use pleasure to refuel?
I mean, it's a great question. I think that it's recognizing that we all have limited resources, and that we tend to, when we put other people first or focusing on caretaking, we're sort of running out of gas. And that's sort of the metaphor. And I sort of say it's like you're trying to push the car up the hill, and instead of looking for a gas station. And, in fact, it'll probably stall and you'll be literally pushing it up the hill. And so it's recognizing that it's the restorative practices. And as I said earlier, I think pleasure sort of takes self-care up that notch. It's like, it's not about turning yourself on. It's like living a turned on life. There's an energy, there's a vitality, there's, you know, there's a spirituality to it in a sense. And I think that helping women sort of recognize that it's a practice, just like they do yoga, or they might be eating well, allowing small acts of pleasure and prioritizing pleasure in every day is, I think, what's going to help you ultimately, sort of be living your best life and have the most to give.
Yeah. I love that way that you express that, that it's not so much about kind of trying to use your ability to take pleasure in these little moments and kind of temporarily kind of get a high or have an orgasm or have a peak experience as a woman or a person. It's also about living a turned on life, so that you're trying to bring this quality of joy and pleasure to everything you do. And I'm wondering what are some things that, concrete specific examples of maybe a woman you've worked with or a client you've worked with that has done this, or, what are some ways people can do this, live a turned on life? What would be a first step for that?
Sure. Again, I think it's this idea of small pleasure practices. And they can be 5 or 10 minutes. They don't have to cost a lot of money, if any. And so it's everything sort of from maybe savoring a nice piece of chocolate to the glass of wine, or I often say, like, make your sort of your pleasure playlist. And I have this it's like a $5 item. Of course, now it's not going to work. It's a little disco ball that you can put on your phone. And it's just amazing how, like, getting your body to move, like just putting on a song.
Can you
and a
hold
lot
that
of
up for a minute, Megan? I'm curious. Can you hold that? So what is that? Is it like a disco ball or something?
Yeah, it's like a disco ball. I don't know if you can, it won't cascade the image so well on the wall. Well, you can see a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's just, it makes me smile, right? I sort of give these as gifts a lot because, again, something really small can shift your state, can shift your mood. And it really shifts your energy. And so, again, it's something small like that I think, just playing one song and moving your body, taking pleasure. And I say this especially with women who have maybe young children at home. Like, they literally have, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there.
Yeah.
But if you're purposeful about how you spend that time, it can really make meaningful differences.
Yeah. Well, and when you talk about women who have young children at home, what came to mind to me is that, I think sometimes we forget to use the people in our lives as resources for joy, and if you have a child at home, they are really good at playing. That's what they do. And so, and often even a partner you've been with for many years has the capacity to play or be creative or imaginative with you. And so, how do you tap into that rather than, kind of stay on that track you're on, getting your to-do list kind of completed, rather than pausing and saying, oh, let's create this little disco moment in our lives, where we dance, where we listen to music, where we savor chocolate, whatever it is that brings you that shift from kind of doing to enjoying.
And I love that you added the word play, because I like to put play and pleasure together. I feel that sex is a place it's like the adult playground in many ways, and that we as adults often don't have play spaces, or maybe some of us didn't learn to have, or didn't have an opportunity for a lot of play when we were little. And so, again, sometimes people really disconnected, sort of disembodied, again, from the ability to play as well as from pleasure. And so, again, incorporating those in our environment and learning from others and watching others who know how to play can be really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, we are coming to our time here, but I really wanted to just check in with you to see if there's anything else that you want our listeners to know. And this is not just for females, for women. This is for anybody who is looking to increase pleasure in their life and take more pleasure in their bodies. So, is there anything that you want people who struggle with taking pleasure to know before we end?
I guess I would sort of say that sense of like, this isn't a dress rehearsal, right? We get this one life, and we can't get back time. So being really purposeful, and to me, the role of prioritizing pleasure to, again, it's sort of not your to-do list. It's this idea of your to-da list, right? Like you get to be your own fairy godmother. Like we get to create our own happy endings. And I think empowering women to know that, again, I think pleasure and power goes a lot together as well, helping women sort of, by knowing their pleasure, sort of own their power and their voice. It's often like even going to get a massage, they're not necessarily going to say, I like it harder or deeper. Like I think we have often women a difficult time using our voice, specifically on behalf of what we want and need. And so that's what I really want women and anyone listening to take away, because I think it's true across genders often. And I have something called, it's a 9-day pleasure challenge. So it's just sort of taking home this idea that it doesn't have to take a lot of time. And it's really just a consciousness. It can even be mental rehearsal, reliving peak moments of pleasure. And so anyway, I would invite anybody who would like to take the 9-day pleasure challenge. You can go to my website, which is greatlifegreatsex.com/pleasure, and make it sort of a priority for the new year.
Mm-hmm.
Or anytime.
Right, anytime. And just kind of what came to me too is what happens, or do you have any advice for people who kind of can do maybe one pleasure prompt or one pleasureful thing one day, but then fall off the wagon, have a hard time kind of staying on track? How can we kind of stay on track? What's one way we can do that?
Well, again, I think it's setting the intention, and that often, people can get very all or nothing, black or white, right? If it's like, I'm doing this, or, oh, I missed a day or two. It's always like, it's every moment's an independent event, and it's a time to sort of restart, and reset. So you can, as soon as you have consciousness around it, you have the opportunity to make a different choice, either in that moment or an hour from then, or even the next day.
Yeah, wonderful. I love that idea that it's, you mentioned before that it's spiritual, that there's a spiritual element to it. So it's really, it's about a mindset that you adopt and incrementally kind of expand more and more in your life.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. And it has been such a pleasure to talk to you about this. And thank you to everybody who joined us or who is watching this on the replay. And for everybody who makes pleasure a priority in their lives in order to empower themselves and uplift the people around them. This is Alicia Muñoz signing off for now. See you next time.